along the regional network. So our public engagement plan, I'm sure if you ask Sandy and Curtis for a copy, I'm sure we can share that with you all later if you're interested in getting into the weeds. But it outlines kind of how we intend to meet those goals. And I'll give you just kind of a brief overview of some of it now. Public engagement is going to be conducted in 3 phases over the course of more than a year. Each phase builds on each other, but it also allows people to plug in where they can. So there will be ample time for your community, your jurisdiction to share feedback and to get involved. We are currently in I would say we're maybe technically in phase 1, but I think we're more in preparation for phase 1 because we haven't fully gone out before the public yet with any asks. So next slide, Rashawn. So we intend for the Safety Action Plan to reflect the values and interests of a wide range of transportation modes, age groups, different backgrounds, people across the whole region. To accomplish this, we're going to use a blend of tactics, virtual options, in-person meetings, pop-up events to meet people where they are, social media, a regularly updated website dedicated to move safely, and more. And that's kind of how we're planning to reach the general public. But we also have identified a few engagement audiences that will play a more detailed and expansive role in our engagement process. The first one of those audiences is our Safety Action Working Group. Each of your jurisdictions has appointed 2 representatives, maybe even some of you here in this virtual room today, to serve on the working group. The working group will advise and provide technical expertise throughout the development of the Move Safely plan. The second are our community partners. These are community organizations, established jurisdiction-level working groups and committees, faith-based organizations, trade and business groups that are already working in the region. We'll be asking those partners to help us get the word out about engagement opportunities using their existing meetings, events, and communication channels. And then the last engagement audience that we really wanted to focus in on today with you all are our community champions. My colleague Rashawn is going to provide a more detailed look at the role of community champions and how you can help us identify the right champions to reflect your jurisdiction.
All right, thank you, Ashley. So similar to what Ashley just said, the community champions represent just one of the many ways we are engaging your specific jurisdiction. And so in a couple of minutes, we'll have people either participate in the chat or come up and mute. We'd love to hear some of your ideas of who you guys would recommend as community champions. Before that, these individuals, they're going to represent your specific communities. They're what we call under-engaged, not typically engaged in the public participation process. These community champions are going to help host local events to gather feedback, and that feedback will help inform the development of Move Safely Blue Bridge. And these individuals also receive a stipend for their efforts. So we have 2 asks today. One is to identify some of those under-engaged communities and also to identify some of the recommendations for community champions, again, in your specific areas. Some of the characteristics of an under-engaged community is, and this is not a comprehensive list, but as we're thinking right now, these can be demographics in your area, specific geographical areas, really communities that historically or currently don't show up in the engagement process. So perhaps they don't typically respond to surveys, they don't come to public, typically in large droves, come to public meetings. Perhaps there's a dearth of active community organizations in these communities. Think about communities that are actually physically separated by some type of barrier community, and perhaps that's the reason why, again, they're not showing up to public meetings or virtual meetings. Sometimes these meetings also have higher rates of poverty and unemployment levels. So if we could just take a minute, you could happy to come off of mute, and then we're monitoring the chat. Just think back in your specific counties, which communities would be considered under-engaged.
You're looking for someone to respond. In Greene County, it would be Latinos, African Americans, and really, I would argue anybody that is probably 60% or less of the AMI.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for Nelson County, it's very similar. We've definitely got specific geographical areas and demographics that are very engaged, and those are easy to pinpoint. The rest of the county is less engaged on varying degrees, but we do have some specific areas like Norwood and Wingina and Gladstone that are harder to reach.
What was the last one, Emily? You said Gladstone?
Gladstone, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
It's pretty geographically isolated. It's right down by the James River and pretty far from the rest of the county.
Based off the public engagement, we still have areas, and this is not a Louisa County problem. This is a group problem of the areas that don't have internet service, where people are relying completely on their cell phone. And with that, we have a percentage of people that have properties they don't live full time. They might be rental income properties. We also have a large group of people that may work outside of the community and have to commute to either Charlottesville, Fredericksburg, or Richmond, which means if you have an in-person meeting, it'll be hard for them to attend it if it takes them till 6 o'clock to get home and they have to pick up kids or anything else like that from daycare. And so, those are problems, issues that just about every rural county is going to face. So.
Yeah, for Albemarle, it's interesting because we have populations in both the rural and I guess the more urban areas that are under-engaged. So there's different strategies to kind of reach both of them. For the rural ones, like Tom just said, they might be just not have internet or just hard to reach or just hard to get them all together. So there's both the rural aspect and then some urban aspect as well. You can get to them, but again, historically they've been kind of isolated into little enclaves almost.
This is Jason Fluvanna. Yeah, I echo everything that Tom said, essentially regarding the lack of internet connectivity or high speed. That tends to be in particular areas of the county. But geographically speaking, our southeastern part of the county, Bremo and West Bottom, have been underserved historically. It tends to be an African American population overall. Based on some of our turnout, it's a few of our more contentious meetings. That was evident that it was either underserved purposely or people weren't engaged or not participating.
Yeah, Jason, what was the last point? You said West
Bottom. It's in the southeastern portion of the county. They're just small communities, crossroad communities.
Thank you. These are all great. Is there any more communities people want to identify? And come off mute or put in the chat.
From the urban perspective, I know we typically do not hear as much from lower income. I think when we did our last sort of big public engagement effort, most of the responses were probably a household income of $75,000 or higher. And then we also, unless we make really concerted efforts, any sort of demographic minority, Latinx, Hispanic, African American, etc., are not well represented in our engagement efforts unless we're specifically reaching out to those communities. I think also this might be more of an issue in the rural areas than maybe the urban areas, but maybe seniors or individuals, you know, that are retirement age or older might be a little bit underrepresented as well.
All right, thank you for that, Sandy. All right. So I'll continue on. We're going to do a similar exercise in our last couple of minutes to help identify some community champions. So for this, I would just think about it as individuals that would work in the communities we just identified. So they're going to work really closely with them. They're going to represent some of the interests and priorities of those communities. They're going to participate in local events that target these communities. So if we can just take maybe a minute or two, again, with a mute or chat, if there's specific individuals that come to mind, would be helpful.
I have a quick question about that, if that's okay. I understand individuals like church leaders, organization leaders, but are you looking at like very involved Facebook groups or Instagram groups that, you know, we have a Louisa residence group, but we also have a Lake Anna group. Is that part of that, or are we really talking about boots on the ground individuals that represent certain organizations and groups?
Yeah, it's going to be, and team can jump in, more of the former. So these are individuals.
Okay.
They can't be active in these groups, but they're people we would liaise with directly.
Okay.
That's for the champions. I think it would be helpful for us if there are groups that are coming to mind. It's certainly helpful for us to know of those because maybe we can see them in that audience as a community partner to help spread information, or maybe we can check out those groups and see if there's a really active participant who might be interested in stepping into the community champion role. So both are helpful.
And then another question, with the community champion, how much, if anything, do they need to know about transportation?
I would say it's more important that they know their community. We will be providing training to the champions about the plan and about, kind of what we're hoping they can convey out to the public. And that'll be an opportunity for them to, kind of brush up on that information. So I would say it's more important that they understand their community, they're respected in their community, or have good roots or connections there.
Yeah. So, Tom, if you don't mind, 2 recommendations I'd probably have for Louisa County. It would be Robin Antonucci. She's in the Zion Crossroads area. She's very vocal when it comes to transportation stuff. So I think it'd be beneficial to have her in at the beginning because a lot of people go to her in the Spring Creek subdivision and Green Springs area. And then the other one, I haven't talked to him about it. I don't know what he would want, but Willie Gentry. He served VDOT for 20 years, then was a Board of Supervisors member for about 20 years. And he is getting off in January. So I don't know if he would still want to be involved or not, but I do think this is something that he knows the community really well and he knows transportation really well. So I think he would have some opinions on it as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris.
That's awesome.
Chris, what part of the county does Willie Gentry typically represent?
So Willie's in the Cuckoo District, which is central and eastern part of the lake.
Thanks.
For those members of the committee that don't have people that come to mind immediately, when do you need that information by?
Yeah, we are looking to collect names before December 10th. So within the next week would be great.
Does anybody that's online today have some names they'd like to give out now, or does everybody like to go back and sort that out?
I have a few names in mind, but I want to check with Dylan before we send in anybody. We do really, tend to focus with those communities on trying to get outreach through the community centers and the churches and stuff like that. And there's a few individuals within the community centers themselves that are very proactive about that. And then there's a few other individuals I have in mind. But like I said, I'll get with Dylan and we'll get you a list before December 10th.
Okay. All right. Well, I will leave my email in the chat and then we'll send you guys some follow-up, but this has been incredibly helpful.
Thank you all so much. That's great.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Is Mr. Barnes with us? Or is Chuck filling in? Oh, Mr. Barnes, I see you in the bottom there. Excellent.
I am actually here on the phone. I thought I saw Chuck's name as well here.
I'm on.
Maybe not. Yeah. Well,
I'm
I'm
on.
going to defer to Chuck on this one. I'll let as far as smart scale stuff.
All right, Chuck, educate us on smart scale.
Okay. We've gone around to all the localities and done presentations through the residencies. We're trying to circle back to try to identify which projects you guys want to submit or would you like to work on for next round. So we'll be following up probably this week and next week to try to finalize that list. I know most of you are still with board changes and stuff like that. You weren't sure. CTB meets tomorrow or next week, Monday and Tuesday, to vote on the final changes that are going to be made for this round 6. So that should be an interesting set of meetings. They have posted a summary of all of the proposed changes with some additional CTB recommendations to their website. And those mainly focus on, there were some changes to the number of applications. They're looking at a tiered system now instead of just cutting them in half, 3, 4, and 6. I think we will all be in tier 1, which is 3 applications. So that's probably going to be our cap for this round. The other ones we'll have to wait and see. The HPP changes, they're looking at removing step 2. A lot of this stuff we've presented on before, and I know Sandy's presented on most of it before. So there's not a lot of changes. They did add an additional high priority for the HPP, because they're gonna let the regional bodies and MPO or the corridor studies like STARS studies or pipeline studies, if you're going to submit the whole corridor as an application, that's going to be eligible for submission for HPP funding. That's something they just added in the last couple of weeks. So that's something that's possibly going to get adopted too. So more to come next week once we hear from the CTB what they decide to do. That's pretty much all I have. I've heard from a few of you. Like I said, I'm going to try to follow up with all of the localities over the next 2 weeks to try to see where they're at with their choices for submissions, and then we'll go from there. Any questions?
No, Chuck, if you get a chance, as we move on to the next agenda items, could you drop the link to where the most recent recommendations are for consideration in the meeting chat?
Yeah, let me go to it and I'll drop it in the chat.
All right, thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Chuck.
Oh, one more thing. There's also a number of letters that were submitted to the CTB that are also posted on the same website. It's on the Smart Scale, within the Smart Scale portal on their resource page. All this information is, so that's what I'll post that link so you guys can go get that information. And if you want to read some of the responses from a lot of other localities and individuals across the state, that'll be light reading, if at the least. So, all right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chuck. Mr. Youngblood, I'm looking forward to hearing about the Route 151 corridor study.
Well, greetings. How's everybody today?
Good.
Good.
Well, thank you for presenting right after Thanksgiving.
Do you actually want me to? I've got the slide presentation from the PDF link that you provided in the agenda. Do you want me to show that, or you want me to just kind of go through a briefing discussion over the meeting and what the study is?
Is there a preference from the committee?
All right, well,
Whatever's easiest.
If you'll give me the share opportunity, I can.
You should be able to. Is it not letting you?
Let me see here. Share screen. There we go. All right, so everybody should see the slide presentation. It's PDF. The link that Curtis sent out is to the VDOT project corridor website. All of the presentation materials from the second public meeting, which we had a few weeks back, are there. This presentation is a PDF version on there as well that you can look at through your leisure. Anybody that knows the 151 corridor recognizes that it's a little unique in the area. It's a tourist destination point. Wintergreen is there as a four-season resort. A number of breweries, wineries, vineyards, you name it. You know, there is something for just about everybody down through the corridor. This is actually the second study that we've done. First study was back in 2013. As a result of that study, you know, we had a number of improvements, 151 intersection, Rockfish. We had offset turn lane improvements. We had HSIP projects, number of small scale projects, and the most recent approved project is a new roundabout that's going to go at the southern end of 6 and 151 near the Rockfish Valley Community Center. This particular corridor and the folks in the community are very vested in their community, and they're very concerned about the corridor. So back from 2013, you know, we recognized that after a 10-year horizon, we needed to go back and look at the study again. So we've elected to look at a 14-mile section of the road, and that's from basically looking back again at the 6-151 in the northern section all the way through the S curves, back down past the ski barn and in that area. So 7 intersections being looked at, in addition to some other areas of concern. The folks that showed up at both meetings, I think we had 50 or so at the very first meeting. I think we had probably close to 80 or 90 at the second meeting. They're very verbal, cordial, but very verbal, and like to share their viewpoints and so forth. So a lot of the issues that, you know, they've brought up, you know, freight movements that are coming through the corridor, just the sheer volume of traffic. And as part of that, number of safety intersections that have been identified through PSI and VDOT's traffic data. And then, of course, we're looking at the all modes, so it's a multimodal aspect. Now, Chuck will tell you, just like in Culpeper District, Lynchburg District, all of our studies, we look at a multimodal process, whether or not that comes to formation, you know, as far as for final recommendations and solution sets. Sometimes it's very viable. Sometimes it's not. We heard loud and clear that this community is not very interested in bike and pedestrian improvements along the entire corridor, maybe in the Nelly's Ford area. And even then it's circumstantial at that, but pretty unique perspective, recognizing that the corridor sees a number of bike uses all the way through the corridor. No build operations, as you see, you know, we've looked at each one of the intersections, and, you know, from a grand scale perspective, there is not really substantial issues from a capacity operations through the corridor. Again, most of these are safety oriented. However, there are some areas that see capacity and operation issues, and they've all been looked at and recognized. And the funny thing is we've either have project solutions for those from the 2013 study, or we've got projects that are actually funded that'll be coming up, like I said, is the 6 and 151 for the roundabout location. We did go through the crash analysis. As you can see, there's no shortfall of crashes along the corridor. Matter of fact, even through COVID, in those areas through there, the crashes were still pretty substantial, and they have actually increased over the years. Fatal, severe injury, the visible injury, non-visible, and road departure aspect, 212 total accidents. Speeding is, of course, one of the major concerns through the area. Congestion at certain intersection, aggressive driving, and then sudden stop rear ends are quite valid through the entire corridor. And to no surprise, it's a lot of the tourists that come into the area that are not familiar, with a lot of the attractions and so forth, are one of the reasons why we see some issues with, rear end collisions being a high aspect. And then the speeding really is a variety of rationale and reasons through that. It is a scenic corridor, and it ties into the Blue Ridge Parkway and Skyline. So there, it's a cut through area as well. So as far as our review, we're looking at a multitude of different solution sets. And this second meeting that we had is basically looking at and showcasing those. We're doing the survey a little bit differently on this particular. Normally we'll do a survey ahead of a meeting so we have an idea. We're doing the survey on the back end. It will be released here, I believe, the week of December 7th. And what we're trying to do is capture how everybody feels about the solution sets this time. So I'm not going to go into, a substantial discussion on each one of these project solutions. You guys can go through and look at this, but there were a number of roundabouts, Tannenbark, 6151, that were looked at as solution sets. This particular intersection at Avon was an HSIP project back in the 2013-15 timeframe, but we're still seeing issues out there. And one is some of the site concerns and just the skewed alignment in, as a whole. And one of the long-term solutions there is to put in a roundabout. It is probably one of the more advantageous projects. Does slow the speeds down a little bit, plus the right-of-way aspect because of the previous construction at that location. We've got quite a bit of right-of-way in that area, so really most of the construction would be within the actual road area itself. So it's I think this is probably one of the better solutions going to come out of the project that Nelson County may push forward as far as a project. Again, the no build solution set shows dramatic improvement for the area and capacity and operations. So again, it's one of the more viable. Tannenbark is another one of those intersections that has had fatalities back over the years. There's sight distance issues. Unique thing about this, no matter what solution set you put here, it's going to be a high dollar solution. We go through the crash history here. We have turn lane improvements, which means you're cutting back a bank and you're doing, additional right-of-way takes, some access management. Not a cheap project. That's one of two solution sets. The second one is a roundabout. One of the unique things that we heard is speed through the corridor. The Nelson County folks definitely want to see reduction in speed, and roundabouts have a unique way of reducing the speed. And so surprisingly, very receptive to the roundabouts and the fact that when you look at it in a grand scale, almost could be like a super street type of a project where you're looking at multiple roundabouts through the entire corridor. People will get used to those relatively quickly. And again, the speed aspect is one of the caveats there that the roundabouts will help assist in dropping. Most of the other improvements, again, are at the high PSI intersection or intersections that we've heard either from Nelson County or their citizens that need improvement areas. Most of these are going to be turn lane improvements and access management through the entire corridor. One of the other things that we heard and that we broadcasted loud and clear is the land use decision making, aspect of trying to see better land use decision, and I guess really looking at what improvements the developers themselves can push forth. VDOT is not a land use decision maker. It is the local government entity. So when I say this is basically to each one of the local government entities. You guys have the power through your board and through your zoning amendment and comprehensive plans to be a little bit more proactive in requiring turn lane improvements, where VDOT does not necessarily have that ability. We have to work within the confines of our own code and what required through the TIAs based on, turning movement ratios and what the volumes are going to be. Whereas a local government can go in and say, well, if you're going to be putting in this particular type of development, we're going to require turn lanes as part of that process. It does increase the cost on the front end, but it also provides for a more safe and efficient corridor. And it's, like I said, it's one of those things that the local government can be a little bit more proactive in their corridor development and their development aspect of new land use decisions that are be coming forth. One of the recommendations we did and we have made as a part of this study is looking at Nelson County putting a corridor overlay on the 151 where they have a little bit more teeth in the requirements along the corridor, something that VDOT cannot do, but the local government can. And that is one methodology by which the local government entity can be a little bit more proactive, is doing an overlay district. The rest of these, again, we go all the way down through the corridor into the S turns. And when you look at it, from a grand scale standpoint, some of these could go to HSIP and they could go corridor wide in regards to the improvements. Other projects, will strictly be smart scale by the sheer volume of cost associated. You're looking at roundabouts, being the roundabout at 6 and 151, I think is going to be about a $16 million project. The corridor is a little unique in the topography aspect and some of the environmental concerns, which raises the cost of the projects. When you do have larger scale projects like roundabouts. So, we try to have a variety of different alternatives through the corridor. Bike and pedestrian improvements along the corridor are going to be geared more towards the Nelly's Ford area, which makes sense. It is a more densely populated area. There is a master plan here for, Wintergreen. One of the unique things about this area is Nelson County actually went for a UDA type of a concept here. Of course, that got shot down because the people didn't really quite understand the urban development aspect of it. They already meet the criteria. It's one of the reasons why they were looking at the study. Surprisingly, we did not hear anything about this in the second public meeting, but it's still some viability there as far as a growth area to give it a little bit more teeth for future submissions in smart scale HSIP. So with that, I'll stop sharing. If anybody has any specific questions, I'm happy to provide feedback into that. And again, anybody that understands the Nelly's Ford area, Sandy does. She worked as the planner there. A very vested and very involved community. And when you look at that, it is really it's a double-edged sword. One, you have the folks that are very interested in what goes on in the community. Also, they are very, they can be very assisted in the process, and they can also be very detrimental. I have a few folks, Emily knows too. I get emails from quite a few people on a regular basis daily. And so it becomes a challenge over a period of time. I don't really experience this anywhere else but Nelson County. And it just goes to show that, the people are vested. They want to see improvements through the area, and they want safety and viability in conjunction with the land use aspect. So with that, I'll open up for any questions.
I do have one question, Rick. I know that basically the localities have the ability to sort of require higher standards than VDOT can require, but can VDOT advise the counties and the localities on those improvements to be requesting?
Absolutely. VDOT is here as a technical assistance provider. So if a local government entity is looking at doing an corridor overlay on a particular corridor, we've got examples. Campbell County did this a number of years ago on 29. I just happened to be the planner at the time in Campbell County when that happened, so it's something near and dear to me. But yeah, we can definitely help in providing, what those levels could look like for a local government entity to put more requirements on a developer and doing turn lane improvements. And that's what it comes down to. It's a little bit more money into the front end load for the improvements, but recognizing that the ingress egress is one of those reasons why you're doing these and providing a safer environment. Most developers are going to understand if people can get in and out of their development safely, they're going to be more apt to come on a regular basis. If they find it challenging and unsafe, folks are going to find someplace else to go.
And then I don't know if anybody else has questions, but I have one other one that maybe is a little bit more open-ended, and I promise I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot. But as we're talking about some of the changes to the major funding program, Smart Scale, where there are a lot of intersections we're talking about. You said superhighway, then a series of roundabouts, and those would all work really great if they're all in place. But do you have any thoughts on maybe or does anybody have any thoughts on sort of the status and the opportunity to implement some of these more, comprehensive strategies when the funding programs seem to be so project specific?
There are going to be challenges. I've always told everybody in the Lynchburg district, we kind of treat it as a chess game every round of Smart Scale. We identify which entity should submit a particular project in order to maximize the opportunity for funding. The unique thing, one of the unique components, and I'll put Chuck on the spot too and ask him, from a district perspective, one of the things that we've identified, one of the big issues is, bike and pedestrian getting a large chunk of the high priority money, but they're lower cost projects. So of course they're going to score well. Doesn't necessarily mean that the district grant won't be able to fund those projects, but we just have to try to identify the best avenue, to maximize the funding opportunities. The Ready, Set, Go grant that is available that Nelson County applied for and got as a part of the UDA, study at the Nellies Ford area, can help maximize TAP opportunities. And of course, there are some match monies associated with that, but we try to identify HSIP as quickly as we can, and if the B over C ratio is good, some of those projects can be funded relatively sooner than later. So it's really it's a chess game, but it will be a little bit more challenging. I think getting the high priority funding specifically for the rural area, but those opportunities really weren't there before for the rural areas anyway. From the high priority, it's still more urban centric, but it's one of the parts of the game that we play going through, and we just try to maximize all funding streams and not just Smart Scale.
I would agree with Rick. I mean, the biggest thing is we found is a lot of our, even our bike ped projects, the cost of them has gotten to the point where they can't get enough money in tap to fund the project. So they're having to go with revenue share, which the 50-50 match seems to be more than what some localities can do. So it's difficult to get a lot of these projects funded. And now that, like I said, I agree with Rick in that we tried to work with the localities and the MPO and the PDC on who might be the best folks to try to submit those projects to get them funded. And we've been really, really successful in the past. So with the changes this time, I think it's not going to be quite as easy, especially for the rural areas. Last round, we were able to get some more projects funded in the area type D. Now they were in an urban setting, like the town of Warrenton and the town of Culpeper, but they were still their area type D project. From a rural standpoint, they're in that funding group for smart scale. So yeah, it's been difficult, but like similar to Rick, what Rick does, we look at all the different funding sources and try to match the funding towards the project towards the funding. It's just that most of the projects now are more over costly than what the some of those funding applications can support.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions? Well, Rick, thank you. That was very good. I enjoyed that. I'm going to bring up something you mentioned later on here.
Okay, there we go.
So identification of future topics. Does anybody have a future topic that they'd like to discuss in upcoming meetings? Or I will create one. All right, I have a few ideas. I think it'd be good to have VDOT give us another update on smart scale on depending mainly two things: how many projects will actually be able to submit, and if there's an update to the PSI ranking going into the next year.
We did get updated PSI data through 2022. It came out a couple weeks ago. I think I forwarded it out to most folks, at least the residency. So I know Scott has it for you, but I can send it to you, Tom.
Oh, yeah, that would be great.
I haven't updated the individual maps. I just have the whole district. So, but we have that information updated through 2022.
Great. So again, if there's more updates with VDOT Smart Scale, I think that'd be good to have on the next agenda. I picked up when Rick was talking about when you're updating your comprehensive plan, here's a couple things that localities should take into consideration. I would also be interested if VDOT, and I don't know whether that's Rick or a combination of people, want to give like a 5 or 10 minute spiel of, you know, these are things localities should try to implement in the transportation section of their comprehensive plan as recommendations and a guiding principle when you're having either rezoning a PUD or a conditional use permit. I mean, if there's a list of 4, 5, 10 things, I think it'd be interesting for us to all hear it and then have a discussion of what we could add to that.
I mentioned it. I'll let charge. I'll throw it to Chuck now. No, I think Chuck, if you want, you and I can get together. I'll take the lead on that since I brought it up, even though, you know, we only have one county within the area, but the information is beneficial to everybody. And so Chuck, if you're okay with that, you and I can touch base maybe early next week, and I can put together a little presentation and get your input in as well.
That sounds good.
Okay.
That'll work.
I didn't think you'd have a problem with that.
No, not at all.
Thank you. And then lastly, I told you I'd come up with ideas if no one else did. I think it'd be interesting to have maybe at least a 30-minute discussion as the group of what does each city town, county require for either rezoning, conditional use permit, or a plan unit development, what do we require to get a complete application to go to the elected and appointed officials? Is it a transportation study? Is it a TIA? Is it none of those things? Maybe it's an email from VDOT. They've looked at the concept plan. Perhaps it's something a little further, more detailed. What exactly are we as localities accepting as part of applications for the decision makers and staff to make a staff report and then make a decision on that, knowing full well that it'll be the site plan review process where a majority of the engineering is going to be done for VDOT to make a formal comment. And so I think it's been, we've kind of touched on that in the Friends in the last 6 years that I've been part of this organization, but I think it's maybe good in the new year to touch base on what it is we're all getting and what are we reviewing, if that makes sense. What do you think, Sandy?
Well, I think it's less important what I think versus what the rest of the committee thinks. But, you know, I think maybe to facilitate that, our staff could maybe put together, like either reach out to you all or to look through your ordinances or your requirements and start putting together sort of like a list of how each of the localities does that and sort of discuss what works, what doesn't work, you know.
Well, to save you that time and effort, I think that if we do have that as an agenda item, we should bring that list to you of when do we require traffic impact analysis versus a study and stuff like that. I don't want to tax you with, I think we could bring that to the table. So with those 3 ideas, does anybody else in the committee, do you like those 3 ideas for topic points? Do you want to have other ideas?
I don't want to speak for Dylan, but I do really like that last topic idea. That's something that we've been kind of working on our own side of things. And, you know, we're going into updating the zoning ordinance and everything. And we used to have, you know, formal site plan review committee meetings before bringing things to planning commission and subsequently the board. But over the past several years, we haven't held an SPCA meeting in a long time. And we're trying to figure out how we want to do things going forward.
And then, Tom, I had a question about similar sentiment. How do other localities deal with the private drive aisles that we've received bonding for, but it's not enough to actually convert it to full VDOT spec road? How they've dealt with that? Because I know we've got several in the queue, and I'm sure there's others out there that have a similar situation.
Wait, Chris, am I understanding correctly? So you have roads that were bonded that were supposed to be taken into the system, but the bond wasn't high enough to pay for this upgrade? Is that what's happening?
30,000 foot view back when the housing market crashed with 2008-9. There's projects that got extended out multiple times. And now because of that, they never built the houses, never got the cash flow to build the VDOT roadways, but we now have everything's approved for it to become a state roadway except being built to standard. Well, it's $240,000 and we've got an $89,000 bond. So how are we going to fix that funding gap, especially when there may be 2-3 houses?
Yeah.
And the people who are going to end up benefiting are going to be the developers who, if we end up building the road and covering that extra cost, well, now they're going to go ahead and be able to sell the additional lots or build homes on it. So we're kind of in a rock and hard place where, do we give it to the HOA and say, here, we're giving this property back to you and we're going to give you the money that was bonded for y'all to maintain the roads and y'all do that with you what you will, or what? And I don't really know the answer, and I know we've talked internally about it, but Tom's idea about asking the other localities brought up a good point.
Are other localities experiencing that?
I know in Campbell County, they've had roads where subdivisions were built, but not necessarily the standard. And I know the homeowners associations have worked with the county and going after revenue sharing in order to bring the road up to at least some standard.
Yeah, I was at Campbell County when they did that too, right?
So you know,
yeah.
You're dating us, Sandy. You're dating, telling everybody we've been working together for a long time. But yeah, that's proven effective. You know, there's subdivisions that already have the homes being built. They just weren't built at that time to a standard. And so it's, you know, it is one part of a process.
Yeah.
Hey Sandy, this is Jason. So we do have a similar issue. At least Chris, you guys in Louisa have bond money. We have several roads we've identified that were supposed to have been built and taken into the secondary system, and for whatever reason we're not. The bonds were released, and nobody seems to know why. Some as recent as the last 10 years. So it is an issue.
All right. Well, maybe we can look into providing some information and facilitate a discussion on that. I don't know if we can do that by the next meeting, but we'll keep it on our radar.
Yeah, and we may have to get some residency folks involved with that too, because they're the ones that typically deal with those issues.
Sandy, I know it was light on ideas in the last meeting, so I've gotten you 4 now.
It's all good. So it sounds like it's going to be the Rick and Chuck show at the next meeting.
It's a good show.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead.
Just as a curiosity,
Sure.
and that's probably a later agenda item, just December or January?
Probably January, February, right, Sandy?
The next meeting? The next meeting would be in January.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's December, I wouldn't be there.
Fair.
Thanks, Rick. Well, I'll go ahead and kick off roundtable. For Louisa County, if you're driving along 64 and happen to take the Shannon Hill exit, you'll start to see our Shannon Hill Regional Business Park water tower coming out of the ground. So that's really exciting. The Board of Supervisors has approved a short-term rental regulation, which will go into effect in January. If your locality is dealing with that as well, feel free to reach out. We'll give you any information we have. Hampton Inn, I just been informed, will be opening at the Zion's Crossroad in January 2024. So that's exciting. That's our first major hotel chain, at least in the 6 years that I've been here, that's going to be opening in Louisa County. And that's near the Diamond Interchange. And the Amazon data centers, which we will have two campuses in Louisa County. One of those campuses is in my office under review, and that should start hopefully clearing land in the first part of next year and start construction later. And I am happy to announce that I've gotten some phone calls from contractors. It sounds like my smart scale project at 522 and 208, the gateway to the lake, that roundabout will start construction next year. So looking forward to that as I take that interchange off and to go up to Northern Virginia. So lots of things happening in Louisa County, and I will turn the floor over to somebody else.
I don't know what Dylan's been keeping y'all up on, but in Nelson, we obviously have our huge comprehensive plan update. That's been what a lot of things have been revolving around lately. We're hoping that we get that to public hearing. I think we've just set some dates in like January and February of next year for it to go to public hearing. And then after that is when we plan to tackle the zoning ordinance. And we're still not sure exactly how we're going to do that, but I'm excited about it anyway. We've got our first utility scale solar project coming to apply. They haven't formally applied yet, but they did go to our Board of Supervisors hearing this past month just to introduce themselves and the project they're looking at doing. So that'll be interesting as well, because we just adopted our solar ordinance a couple years ago, and this will be the first time that we're actually utilizing it. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily. If you have any questions about solar, feel free to reach out.
It's Jason with Fluvanna. Just one quick thing, transportation related. Heard from David might want to mention something about this. The realignment of Bike Route 76 was approved through Palmyra. He just contacted us this morning to let us know. So it's very exciting. Our transportation improvement grant is apparently on hold. I've been told, if that's correct, Mr. Barnes. That's about it transportation wise.
For Albemarle, not really many updates on different projects and processes right now. Jessica's working a lot of CIP funding stuff, which sounds very complicated from whatever I hear in those meetings about money being moved around. Yeah. We'll just keep running on the current projects like Route 20 and Freebridge Center is still just moving forward through the process.
Thank you. Jim, what you got going on in Greene?
Transportation wise, a lot of things in different stages. We have a lot of formerly approved, recently adjusted plans for residential and commercial development, and those are starting to get approved, and the grading and earthwork is starting, and those kind of facilitate or give us the opportunity for further connections. We have a proposal that may come to the board early next year for a PUD commercial mix development that would help create a parallel road network along Route 29 that's been in our plans for probably almost 15 years. We've got parts of parallel road interconnecting being built out along with other PUDs at the Sheets intersection. So we've got a lot of good things that are happening and exciting things that should make improvements and help the traffic flow when the rest of the commercial and residential gets built.
Thank you, Jim. Does anybody else want to give an update?
Curtis, do you want to wait? Did Curtis leave?
No, I'm here.
Curtis, did you want to share just the upcoming meetings for Safe Streets and Roads for All?
I thought he was next to you.
Yeah, my connection did drop earlier, but I'm still here. So for Safe Streets and Roads for All, we do have the stakeholder working group meeting, which several of you will be attending. So I'll see some of you later this month, and that is on December 14th, which is a Thursday. So I'll see you there. And we also have the Regional Safety Summit scheduled for January 10th. Those are the only things I have for Safe Streets currently.
I'll say I have a happy announcement for myself. I'm actually taking a new job. I'll be working with Albemarle County as the director of planning for the county starting next month, or actually January. So I'll be working with many of you all, but just in a different capacity. So I look forward to that new role. And for those of you I won't get a chance much to work with, I look forward to trying to maintain my contacts with you guys in Fluvanna and Greene and Louisa. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing you here, Michael.
Cheers.
Are you abdicating your position, Alberic? Oh, on the committee. You're talking about Albemarle, not on the committee.
Yeah. I was like, I'm not the director right now. That'd be kind of a fun job for me, though. I guess he's just like,
I'm in on this committee.
I was like, whoa, am I director without knowing?
Anybody else like to add on? All right. Well, Sandy, any housekeeping items before I motion for adjournment? All right. Well, I motion to adjourn. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. Everybody have a wonderful holiday, and I will see you next year.
You too, Tom.
Everyone.
Thank you all.